My name is Sam. I call myself a maker and mender. I make bags and I fix people's things for them when they're broken and need to be fixed. All sorts of things. Things that are sewn together, not things that are built out of not fabric. Yeah. We're my sewing room, my table room. I moved here only in April of last year, I guess, so still kind of settling in. It's kind of becoming what it's supposed to be. This is where I fix everything and sew things and make bags. The first bag I made, I embroidered. It's a little handlebar bag, would affix to a bike right here. I embroidered Muel on it and I spelt it wrong. So I went with it because once you embroider something in a bag, it's there, and undoing that kind of stuff sucks. My previous brand, I guess you would say, was Tripping on Bananas, which was hand embroidery. It was my Tumblr when I was 14, and then I turned it into my brand, and I thought it was funny because tripping, drugs, bananas. And then when I was making a second one, I was like starting to make not scrunchies and embroidered stuff. And I wanted to make bags for bikes. I think donkeys are funny. And then I was like, drug mule, bike mule. And it was originally bike mule. I changed it to mule bags because bike mule kind of seemed less good. I was raised by my grandma, who was is a very talented seamstress. When she moved to Canada in the 60s, she worked briefly at a wedding dress sewing, putting together place. So very talented, and my aunts all knew how to sew. So I don't remember learning to sew. It's just it was the girls sew. So I know how. But I think it's really funny when people ask me how I know how, because I'm just I thought everyone did. I do remember my first sewing machine, for not at my grandma's house. My grandpa got me one from a flea market. And it was this little Singer plastic sewing machine, and I would just make my bears' clothes.
Like teddy bears and stuff?
Yeah, my teddy bears and stuff.
That's awesome.
Yeah, they need clothes. I like to say that the patriarchy did make me this way quite genuinely. And I think of the patriarchy and quilting a lot because of how useless an art quilting is. Conceptually, women, a lot of them, weren't allowed to do much other than fix the clothes and make the dinner and etc. And the art of quilting is just taking a perfectly fine piece of fabric, cutting it up into tiny little pieces, and then putting it all back together and making a blanket, which is essentially a piece of fabric. Quilting, making a collage of tiny pieces of fabric doesn't make anything more functional of a blanket. It just makes it really beautiful or artistic, and it's kind of an overlooked art because of the fact that it's women's work. And even when I did embroidery by hand, it was a very overlooked thing that I'd put so much effort into, and I'd be like, yeah, can I sell this to you for $70? And they'd be like, how about 10? And be like, this took me 2 months. And they're just like, ma, it's 2 inches big. And I'm like, well, still took me 2 months. Before I made the quilt bags, I just cut up a bunch of fabric that I didn't think looked very good alone. And I made a bunch of these 15 by 12, I think, bags, little squares. I wanted to sell them for more, but then nobody really wanted them for that. So I just dropped the price a lot because it was more of a thing to just get things through a machine. Just seams on seams on seams. Because there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times 2, 18 seams 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30 seams in that bag, right? And this one has 2, well, 4, because sometimes I roll the edge, make it nice and crisp. But yeah, it's like the 30 times through the machine versus like 3. The bags I make now are very much just a rectangle folded in half with 2 seams. So it doesn't take me that much time. I've gotten a pretty good process for it. So I can sell them for like a amount of money where people are like, okay, yeah, sure. I think I've just taken to making the projects that take me a lot of time, I kind of make them bigger. So I've started making like proper size quilts, little wearable ones, some buttons. And I want to start selling those, and they'll be able to sell more because there's like a intrinsic value to quilts that people have started to put on them, which is nice. I put effort into social media pretty sporadically. Right now, I'm trying to make a lot of bags so that when I do have like a sustained amount of effort that I'm willing to put into social media around like the end of the year probably, I won't like be like, oh, there's none left. Whoops. But I have like some like brick and mortar stores that I know will carry like 10, 15 at a time. So going that way, and then also making sure I have like a backup stock, because I know that's important to not run out of the thing that you're selling. I got a calendar. I'm trying. I have a friend willing to help me as well, who is like into that social media planning stuff. And he's my guru. Business hack. Find people that know how to do things and ask them to do it for you and pay them as handsomely as you possibly can. I actually like apply the different handcrafts arts to different like types of mental anguish. If I don't know what we're calling these things anymore. But quilting is really great for like the holy shit, I have nothing to do and I really need to do something and I just want to do something and cut things up and put it back together and blah, blah, blah. It's when you're like frantic. Like quilting's really great for when you're that kind of anxious, or when I'm that kind of anxious that like just really needs to like cut things up, put them back together, cut things up, put them back together. And that's like the first few steps of quilting, like when you make the square. Because usually when you make a blanket, start with your little pieces and you put them into squares. And then you take those squares and they're done. You put them in a corner. You make like 20, and then you sew all the squares together. The first step making those squares is like a really nice, just like creative smashing things on a board, looking at things, doing a lot of this, doing a lot of like checking it out, moving things around in like a very like active craft. Knitting is for like chilling, breathing, relaxing. Fun fact about my dog is that she can be absolutely feral, unhinged, absolutely out of control. But if I sit down and knit, she'll just relax. And if other people in the room sit down and knit, she'll relax. Or if even, like, she's not that smart. She's a dog. Don't tell her. You can just put like a knit garment on someone's lap and some knitting needles and she'll be like, oh, okay, I'm not allowed to be erratic right now. And that's almost entirely infallible. It's pretty wild. I am inspired, kind of just like what falls in my lap. And then it's like, okay, time to put it all together and make something to put on a wall or turn it into something else, fix a problem. I love fixing problems with like, that's like the bags thing. Things that are like utilitarian, like things that have a purpose is like fun to do, and like just making them like a little quirkier or more fun. I made a sound booth with pool noodles. Like just like I like needing a problem and then being like, here you go. I like making custom bags too. I started with musettes because the 3C, like it's super easy to make. really, like, I make them out of tablecloths from Value Village usually, or like pieces of fabric, but usually tablecloths are the best to like cut into the size that I need without much waste. And then a musette is something I just really wanted one day because I didn't have one, and I was trying to buy one on the internet, like you do. Or I was actually trying to buy one in town, and then the bike shops didn't have them, and I was like, I just want a tote bag that's made for a bicycle, because that is what a musette is. It's the Tour de France bag, you know? Like cyclists in the Tour de France would be like riding past, and then their teams would give them all of their food for that section in a musette, Americanly known as a feed bag. And then online they were all like $40, $50 and clearly like made by someone who wasn't getting paid. And I was like, that's bleak. I don't want that. I can make them. I have a sewing machine and fabric and the know-how. So I started making them. And the goal was to make just custom one-off frame bags for people based on their needs. No zippers, because zippers are a tool of fast fashion and they're stupid. Like when there's 1,000 new items on a site in like a week. The waste that goes into it, they make all the terribly inclusive size ranges, just a lot of problems. But most fashion is fast fashion at this point because it is the cheapest way to make clothes. And we live in a world where the cheapest way to do things is the way things get done. And slow fashion is just the opposite of that. They usually have like a few garments. A real good like green flag for like if you're trying to buy clothes from a brand is if they don't have a lot of options, which sounds like weird because you're like, oh, why don't they have any options? It's like, well, the fewer options, the more that small group of people can accomplish to make and sell to you and make a profit. Like size inclusivity is really like if like not like one size fits all, but like more adaptable clothing to fit you is typically like a slow fashion like not trend, because they try not to trend things. They try to like go towards like just making things not trendy so that you can wear them for a really long time. If it's really expensive, it's probably slow fashion, which is just like an unfortunate fact that like paying people costs money. I use scraps from not from slow fashion brands. And that's like another thing with the quilt bags. You can make them with smaller pieces of fabric. And there's so much waste in the garment industry. Yeah, fast fashion is a problem because we don't know how things are made. People don't know how things are made. Everything that is sewn on a sewing machine. Nothing is sewn by a robot. Everything that is sewn is pushed through a sewing machine by a person 100%. And that blows people's minds, which I think is like really like one of the biggest tools of fast fashion is that they just nobody knows how things are made anymore. There's a separation. When you say slow fashion, people go, oh, like, was this handmade? And you go, do you mean, was it made by a white person that was paid a okay wage? Or do you mean, was it made like every other piece of clothes that you have ever put on your body where it was pushed through a sewing machine by a person? That's how things are made. Like, people just don't want to think about that. The systems, they're just made so that we need them because I can't afford clothes that are made by people that are paid a living wage. Oh, I try to. I shop, like, I try to only buy clothes if I know that it was made sustainably by someone who was paid well. And I try to, like, tell everyone that they're wrong when they shop at Shein pretty aggressively, pretty rudely. I think they don't like me for it, but it's a tool, and it's gonna be the end of the world. My plans for Muel are to really like collect enough capital by selling these musettes that don't cost me a lot of input, to like use that as kind of a jumping off point to start making a little bit of money. buy some real good technical fabrics, lightweight technical fabrics, and like find a way to hold on to using what's left to make things. And then fanny packs, backpacks, bags for a walled basket, which if you ride bikes, you know, very trendy. And maybe like a few shirts or something, some stickers. But making sure that I really stick to not making more garbage, preferably using garbage or waste or refuse or whatever you want to call it, because there's so much of it, and a lot of it's not garbage. It's just undesirable.